It's my pleasant duty to introduce Gerald Szeto, our main speaker for this evening. But first, Jeremy's asked me to say a few things about the process by which this building was constructed, which I'm very happy to do. What I've learned, even though I knew it already, but what I really learned over the last few years is to what degree architecture is a uniquely collaborative undertaking. I mean, we get taught, as I did at high school, about your Le Corbusiers and your I.M. Pays and your Frank Gehry's, and there's this idea of architectural genius, and undoubtedly that's there. But architects aren't like painters in a studio. They don't, just do it themselves. As Hillary Clinton reminded us, it takes a village to raise a child. This building you're in is a kind of strange and wonderful child. And it has to be said that the people who created it would make a rather strange and wonderful village. However, the houses at least would be extremely well designed and constructed in that village. I can't say anything more about what it would be like. Now, originally we had, like all these undertakings, what they call a project control group. And we met regularly and we met formally. And we had minutes and we had agendas. And we had the great and the good there checking that all was going well, and we got periodic ticks and that was all right. But that's not where this building was really made. This building was made, squeezed around the table in my old office in Coombs, cleared of junk just before the people arrived. This was made over coffee. It was made in Hindmarsh's project offices up there and then down the hill, as choices had to be made and budgets trimmed. It was made on site, the site itself, here where we're standing, where more expert people than me discussed things like chilled beams and hanging systems and stair nosing, other things I have learned about, I knew nothing about before, or as I whinged about raised seams. And I apologise to all of those who had to endure that. It was made in Munn Slymore's offices, going through carpet samples, bathroom tiles, and as we sat in different styles of chair and examined iteration after iteration of every design detail. It was made when Gerald first came to Canberra, and three of our students and I had hamburgers on the veranda just up in what is now known as Peppercorn, and we fantasised about what the building, which none of us could really imagine even existing at the time, would be like. Gerald was very patient with us that day, and over the process, while we, or usually me, made odd suggestions, unusual requests, unfounded objections, or just got in the way, patience, understanding and flexibility, and occasionally a firm hand from all of the team, have been at the heart of this grand collaboration. So some of the people who made this building, the main people who made this building that I want to say explicitly and formally tonight. So from Mo Atelier Szeto in Beijing, Gerald Szeto. From Munn Slymore, Eric Innes, Conrad Moore and Chris Jacoby. From Hindmarsh, Dominic Stalteri, Britta Milburn, Jerry Nolan, David Spearing. And from the university's Facilities and Services Department, Michael Wright. Now, thinking about the way I could kind of illustrate this kind of collaboration, for various reasons I won't bother you with, the musical Les Miserables came to mind. It does occasionally in the dark hours of the night. And it seemed to me that wasn't a bad metaphor about the roles that various people had. For us, Gerald was our Victor Hugo, determining the original thing, the grand story that all of us went on to deal with. Eric Innes from Munn Slymore, was in a sense the director who took the book and turned it into the musical that we had before us. Dom is undoubtedly the conductor, of all of the great people from Hindmarsh, running everything, making sure everything was in place. Michael was, I think, perhaps the stage manager, the person who made sure everything was in the right place at the right time. And we, the members of CIW, we're the cast who enjoy the production every day, every night. The only question I have, really, in this extended metaphor is Jeremy. And I don't know whether he should be Hugh Jackman or Russell Crowe. But, the other thing I should say, of course, is that at the end of us, none of us are miserable. You'll notice it on the way out, or perhaps before you came in, there's a pamphlet about the centre, about some of the architectural features of the centre, called 10 Scenes at the Centre. And I encourage you to take a copy and see what we consider to be, in a sense, the most important aspects of the design of the building, or some of the aspects of design of the building that may not be immediately apparent. Some of the things that have meaning, from the colours on the windows to the arrangement of rocks outside the front door. And that pamphlet will explain to you some of those things. But what I'd like to do now is list some of the things that I like about the building, having been involved with this project from the beginning. And the things that I like are the very big things and the very small things. I like the way the building fits into the landscape. I like the way it doesn't shout, but gradually, as the seasons change, is being revealed as the deciduous trees, the poplars and the oaks, start to lose their leaves. I like the way it made way for the gums that were already on the site, and for that we have to thank the ANU arborists, who insisted that we didn't cut down any native tree unless it was very sick indeed. But I like the way it made way for the gums, and especially on the western side, the way that there's a chunk taken out of the building so that one of the trees could have enough space to grow. I like the way that on the other side of the building over this way, what used to be just an area of the university that people walked through has become a courtyard. And it's become really a very beautiful space. I like the way that even though it looks like nothing else in this city, it really couldn't be anywhere else. You can't imagine anything like this building being built by a Melbourne architect, for instance. The small things that I like the skylights at the top of the reading room. I like the way the detail on our new boardroom table was made to match the Fred Ward chairs. I like what we like to think of as the meditation platform in the administration area. I like the proportions of the first-year PhD officers a lot. And I like the way the sun falls on the terrace outside the auditorium up here on the left. You won't be able to see that, obviously, at the moment, but it's really something. Most of all, and this is not a small thing, I like the way that we, members of CIW, have all simply moved in and just occupied the spaces. Perhaps occupy is the wrong word. What I'm trying to say is that the building is perfectly suited to its purposes. And those lucky enough to work in it, we want to be here. In short, it has allowed the CIW to become what it was intended to be. This building works, and it will continue to work for decades to come. And we are immensely grateful to all those who helped to make it real and who have, over the period we've been working here, become friends. Personal friends of mine, friends of the centre. And to repeat those people: Gerald, Eric, Conrad, Chris, Dom, Dave, Britta, Jerry, and especially Michael. Thanks. This building is a monument to your talents, your energy, and your creativity. Thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Gerald Szeto formally to give the lecture tonight. Gerald will, through his lecture, give you a tour of his architectural career, and so I won't go into any details, but I'll just let Gerald take the stage. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here tonight, and I'm really indebted to Jeremy Barmay for everything. I mean, he approached me back in 2010 to help him design this building, and at that point of and I didn't really take him very seriously. Because I had just started a practice in Beijing as a small office, and most of our work is in China, and maybe perhaps as far away as maybe Hong Kong, and that's about it. And then I also wasn't quite sure that whether Jeremy could actually get all his finances together to do this project. But anyway, Jeremy told me that he wanted a building that was that could have both Australian and Chinese sensibilities. And I told him, well, that's a tall order, because I'm not Australian and I'm not that Chinese either. I mean, I think Jeremy may be more Chinese than I am. But he said, well, don't worry. He said, we'll work on it. We'll do it as a whole team, and that is indeed what happened. I wanted to repeat some of what Ben said about that. I'm just I'm just one member of a very large design team that made this building possible. My distance away in China, had a certain problems, and a lot of the issues had to be addressed here, and I think Benjamin has done enormous amount of work to make this building happen. Aside from his academic duties, he was involved in every step and process of the construction. And I think Michael Wright of the ANU Planning Department was extremely supportive of the whole project from day one, even though Jeremy and Benjamin probably had some rather unusual requirements by ANU standards. And of course, the most important people critical to this project is the architectural office of Munsley Moore, especially Conrad Moore and Eric Innes. And I don't know whether Chris is here tonight. And because they played, I mean, without them, this building is really could not have happened, because they made sure that everything was resolved and all that. And of course, then there's Heinmarch with Dom and Jerry, and Dom is here, but I don't know whether Jerry is here tonight. But anyway, so I thank all of them, and it's really without them that none of this, we would not be here tonight. So anyway, tonight I would give you a brief idea of a brief history of what I do, what I've been doing, and although the lecture is really it's titled "The Architecture of Education," I think I will go beyond that a little bit. And anyway, so we can start. I was just to give you a little history of myself. I was born in Hong Kong, but left about when I was 13 years old, and then I went to New York for high school education and for college. After architecture school, I started work at IMPay & Partners in New York. It was not really a coincidence that I started work for IMPay. We were actually family friends. My father and IMPay were schoolmates at St. John's University in Shanghai back in the 30s. And St. John's at that time was a Christian university. And my father was slightly older, and he was IMPay's teaching assistant. So when it came time for me to look for a job, my father called in his chips. And so anyway, and so I started working there, and I stayed on with IMPay for close to over 20 years before I started my own practice in China. When I started working for IMPay, one of the first projects I was involved in was the Bank of China Tower in Hong Kong. This is back in 1983, 84 about. And this was the first building that was of any significance that a Chinese company, state company, would build in Hong Kong. And it was really to show their kind of their financial clout and position in Hong Kong's economy. And they went to Am Pei also because, not just because he was a Chinese-American architect, but because Am Pei's father was the governor of the Bank of China in the 1920s to the 1930s. And you can find banknotes that were signed by his father now. I mean, banknotes from then. But anyway, the idea for this building was that he was to create an instant symbol for the Bank of China. The Bank of China is not China's largest bank, but it was at that time the only bank that was allowed to deal in foreign currency. So that was an extremely important factor. And Am Pei was able to come out with a rather unique design, which also had a lot of, which also created a lot of savings in structural cost. And so, anyway, so that's what it became. But I was just a junior. I was just a college graduate. So at that time, and I didn't get to work on any of the more exciting parts of the building. What I did get to do was to spend close to a year working on all the fire stairs in the building, making sure that that you could escape from the 72nd floor, the top floor, all the way down to the ground floor, and then all the stairs from the basement can come up and get out as well. And those were the days before computers, so everything was done by hand, and so it literally takes that long to get all the drawings done. And at that time, there were working on that team was about 40 people, just the architects alone, just from the architecture office alone. Then there were the structural engineers and the mechanical design people. But as you can see in the building, is that some of the Am Pei's interest in garden design is already quite apparent, and having and his own interpretation of Chinese garden architecture, using a lot of natural boulders and water features. But I can get into that in a little while. After the Bank of China in Hong Kong, Am Pei was, we were asked to work on the Bank of China headquarters in Beijing, which is a much bigger building, but a very short one. The location was to be built in a new financial district in Beijing. The local government had decided that they wanted to create a new Wall Street area. And they basically stipulated that all financial institutions should move over there and build their own building. So the Bank of China, once again, came to Am Pei and asked him to design it. And in this case, it was a much more important building because this is the world headquarters. Hong Kong, that 70-story building was just a branch building. And this particular site, so this is what the building looks like. The building is right on the main, Beijing's main east-west boulevard. And as such, there were severe height restrictions. You were only allowed to build up to 15 stories, but it had to be a massive building. And so Am Pei decided to do an interior courtyard, atrium, to enable light to get into all the offices. And as you can see here, it's a massive atrium. The Hong Kong Bank of China tower that you saw previously can actually fit in this atrium. So in a way, this is the mother of the mother of all the Bank of Chinas. And here also you start to see that Am Pei's interest in gardens. He loved trees and garden architecture, and he wanted to do a giant bamboo, which was very difficult and unheard of at that time in China to get. And not only was it hard to get, but it was also very difficult to maintain. And then he also wanted to do his own version of rocks. Rockeries have always been a major part of Chinese garden architecture. But in most cases, they were usually made out of small small rocks kind of glued together into bigger compositions. But here, we felt that because the building is so large, the scale is so large, that we needed really large monolithic rocks. And Anpei remembered reading in some magazine that there was a place in Yunnan province that had these amazing looking granite boulders. So we all went on a trip down there and scouted for these rocks. And it took actually many, many trips to identify these rocks and then to have them trucked up to Beijing. So the idea of it is really a garden and an atrium, and the banking halls are all part of this internal garden. But as you can see, it's a rather monumental space. And in the middle of the atrium, we decided to do a chandelier in the form of a bicycle wheel to represent China. It's a giant bicycle wheel. After the Bank of China, we started work on the Chinese embassy in Washington, and this was about the year 2001, 2002. And this was a very important project for the Chinese, for the foreign ministry, because it was really the first time that they have decided to do a major building to represent themselves. In the past, they've always either bought buildings and made embassies out of them, or they have had local in China design institutes to design these buildings, like the one that they did in Canberra here. But for Washington, they felt that they needed something really kind of that represents the China's new kind of world position. And so they went out and sought out Anpei to do it. And Anpei, when he was first approached, he felt, well, what he wanted to do was actually a very small-scale building, because he always believed that offices and all that it should be small-scale where it's a very human scale, very workable environment. And he presented a scheme that had a lot of gardens, because to represent China, and because he felt that the best Chinese architecture is really Chinese garden architecture. So we did a scheme that was very, very small scale, but still fulfilled the client's program. But when the foreign ministry looked at it, they hated it, because they said that is exactly what they didn't want. They didn't want a small-scale, domestic-looking building. They wanted this building to represent the kind of the power or whatever of China. And very few clients actually dare to say this to Anpei, saying that, I think this is bad. So I said, well, okay, I'll give you something else. We went to this a much more formal scheme, and came up with something that was acceptable, and that really kind of portrayed China's becoming of age and all that. It's a massive stone building, practically no windows because of embassy's security requirements. But here on the left slide, in the left slide, you will see that Anpei had always felt that architecture should also be complemented by works of art, and preferably works of art that were specially commissioned for the building. So here, and this is and for the Chinese foreign ministry, it was a very new concept. They never really looked at art as being a complement to architecture. What they always normally did was that they would go and get some arts and craft stuff and put it in their building, like a panda carpet or a Great Wall carpet, or reproduction paintings and things like that. And so they would never go to a contemporary artist. But anyway, we were able to convince them, and so we have at least two pieces of commissioned art, and this is done by actually normally a painter or an artist called Liu Dan, And he made these. He made a piece out of using traditional bamboo shoot rocks that are normally seen found in Chinese gardens. These are the interiors of the embassy. It's completely monumental, funereal, tomb-like, and all that. And I think anybody who walks in there cannot feel anything but awed by it. The left side actually shows Ian Pei. He came for a visit, and he's looking up at a specially commissioned sculpture that we had done, and that's by Xu Bing. The end result of it is that Ian Pei felt that the sculpture was too small, and that Xu Bing should go and make more, and hang them, and hang more. And then we started working on the Suzhou Museum, which I think was a very important project for Ian Pei, because Suzhou is actually his hometown, and his Laojia, his ancestral home, and this site is in the center of Suzhou. It's right next door to a very famous garden, the Garden of the Humble Administrator, which is itself a United Nations World Heritage Site. And Ian Pei's own house, his ancestral home, the Lion Forest Garden, is also only about a block away, and that too is also a UN World Heritage Site. But this is a small museum, but Ian Pei felt that it was a very, very special project for him. He wanted to do a white wall, gray trim type of building, because this is the local vernacular of Suzhou and of the neighboring Jiangsu province water villages, where everything is white walls and gray tile. But Ian did not really like tile, because he found it way too. The method of fabrication was way too imprecise, and the color was not uniform enough. So we decided to use stone here. And also, he didn't like the traditional black roof tiles, because he felt that roof tiles really kind of was an added element. It was an unnecessary element. He wanted buildings to be more extension of the walls. And so here we did a stone roof that is all flat, that's all flush with the walls. And so the roof is really a natural progression of the walls. We also tried explored different ways of Chinese garden landscaping. And the bottom slide is an attempt by Ian Pei to do a new kind of rock formation, jiashan, where we went to Shandong province and sourced all these big boulders, and we took them back to Suzhou and we sliced them up and tried to create the illusion of a Chinese landscape painting, seen against the white wall of the adjacent garden. And so you slice them up like bread, except that these things are very thick. And some of them are left with the original skin of the stone, and some are flat. And so it creates this kind of sense of depth and this illusion of depth and perspective. And this was really meant to be seen really from a certain vantage point at the main lobby, where you're separated by water and you're supposed to look at it in this way, so you get this sense of distant landscape. But actually, some of the rocks are not that tall. I mean, a person is probably about that high. And then in other gardens, small gardens, we went to basically that it was to the Chinese tradition of having specimen rocks and specimen trees, and letting one tree do the job. The interior is again an extension of the outside, white walls and gray trim, and with a lot of skylights to bring in natural light. Again, these slides will show that the office's fascination with geometry Pei was a very, he's a very precise man, and he was everything has got to be geometrical and modular. The galleries were kept very small scale because most of the Suzhou collection, so Suzhou Museum collection was not very good because most of the good stuff had already gone to the Shanghai Museum. And what was left was really just a whole bunch of kind of scholarly objects. They were very, very small. And we had to make special cases for them because we felt that to make them more like jewel-like cases so as to highlight them, even though they were not of exceptional quality. And another Pei's interest was that he felt that there should be galleries devoted to contemporary art, even though the client didn't ask for it. So we've created 3 galleries, and in the inauguration of the museum, we actually had to help the museum go and sort out artists for the inaugural exhibition. So this one shows an exhibition of Zhao Wuji paintings, who Zhao Wuji was he's a son of Suzhou, and a very good friend of Pei's, and he was at that time considered to be one of the more famous artists outside of China. And then we had 2 other exhibitions. One was with Xu Bing, and then another one with Cai Guochang, who also did a fireworks display at the opening ceremony. Now, when the Suzhou Museum ended, Pei basically went into retirement, and I decided that it was time to leave. And so I decided to set up an office in China because I felt that with all my experience up to now, working on all these projects in China, I was never really living in China. I was always commuting between the US and China. And I decided to form an office in China because I felt that there were a lot more possibilities there than I would have had in New York. And also at that time, the economy in China was booming. All these foreign architects were all going to China. And I just felt that it was worth to give it a try. So we started a small office. Our office right now is about 20-odd people. It's a very, very young office. I mean, everybody besides me is under 30. So one of the first projects that we started doing was a reconstruction of 2 palaces on the northwest corner of the Forbidden City. This is the whole entire Forbidden City. This is the main entrance. This is Wumen, the Meridian Gate. This is where you normally buy your ticket and then you go in. And then this is the North Gate, the one that you come out of. And the area in red is has 2 palaces in there that used to look like that. One was the garden of the Palace of Established Happiness, and the other one is the Hall of Rectitude. This one is called the garden mainly because it is a garden. Chinese gardens are not necessarily, it's not all open. It's actually a complex of buildings. In this case, it's more than 13 buildings. This is the actual garden. This is the actual Palace of Established Happiness, only these 3 buildings. The back of it is what it's garden. And in 1923, there was a fire, and the red areas and the yellow areas were all burned down to the ground. And there were a lot of rumors about how that fire started, but the most likely one is that in 1923, it was the last years of the Republic, the last years of the Puyi, the last emperor, was still staying in the Forbidden City. And the eunuchs were still there, and apparently they were stealing, plundering all the treasures of the Forbidden City. And the rumor is that they burned down this place purposely to kind of hide their evidence. But no one really knows. The other story is that Puyi was watching a movie and kicked over the projector, and so the whole place went on fire. But Jeremy will have the final say as to how that happened. This is a picture of the actual garden on one of the rock formations, and you can see Puyi there as a young boy sitting on a rock, and the Empress of China, I guess, that is Puyi's mother, actual mother. And so this picture was taken at around 1910, because Puyi was in his, about right, Jeremy? No. And so the fire, this was a fire that, and this is a picture from Reginald Johnston's book, Twilight in the Forbidden City, that actually shows the fire, the results of the fire. And that piece of land was left like this up until the year 2000. So 80 years, it was left as a rubble field. But you can see here that the rock formations of the garden were intact. I mean, they survived the fire, but I mean, it was partially destroyed, but it survived the fire. That was where Puyi was sitting in that other picture. And these were the foundations that were left, and all the stone, but only the foundations were left. So the China Heritage Fund, which is a Hong Kong foundation, decided to donate money to the Forbidden City to reconstruct these buildings in exactly the same manner that they were built, using completely traditional building methods. And also it was a way to encourage and preserve these building skills. So they put up the money, and the Forbidden City has their own architects and all that, and they drew up plans for reconstructing all the buildings on this site. It was actually not a difficult process because all the foundations were there, and Chinese architecture is that if you know the foundations, if you know where the column bases are, you can pretty much determine the heights of the buildings and how they're put together, because it's a fairly modular system. And because of wood construction, it's rather limited, so you can't really do that. You can't really have big spans or stuff like that. So it's a rather easy method of finding out, of recreating the buildings. So this is a picture of before the reconstruction, and then this is a picture of it after the reconstruction. And everything was built according to the days of to the traditional manner. Everything was done by hand. And this kind of arts and craft is still very easily achievable in China. But of course, here in the Forbidden City, it is done to a much better, much finer degree. Like the roof tiles, where it's real liu li wa, and because normally you can never have yellow tiles. And we were brought in not really because we were no experts at traditional architecture or imperial architecture, but we were really brought in to determine what to do with the inside. Because in the old days, the insides of these buildings were all very small-scaled rooms, which if you repeated them today would have been completely without purpose. So we were asked to help them to develop an interior design approach for these buildings. And more importantly, we were asked to integrate modern systems of air conditioning, electrical systems, and plumbing into these buildings without them to be as invisible as possible. And that was really the main challenge for us. More exterior shots. So some of the rockery survived, and as you see here, old stones that were kind of untouched by the fire were all left in their position, and then next to it would be new stone. Because that was the idea of conservation that the foundation and the Forbidden City decided on. The inside we kept the inside basically completely free, very minimal, and really to illustrate the structure, the amazing way that the building is put together. Everything's out of wood, solid wood. And in the old days, you would never see the wood structure, especially not in an imperial building. It would all have hung ceilings usually made of paper, and usually the rooms will be very small and very low. And so we kept it in a very minimal way, and basically just let the original architecture take over. But yet we had to make sure that there were all the modern conveniences. Like we had to install radiant floors to provide heat in the winter, and air conditioning systems within this intricate ceiling. But you can't really see them except for maybe around here. This is the second project that we did in the Forbidden City. This is the Hall of Rectitude, which is to the south of the Garden of the Palace of Established Happiness. Historically, this was the center of Tibetan Buddhism in the Forbidden City, really for the emperors. And the fire destroyed also most of this complex. And here they, working with the Forbidden City Design Institute, we helped them recreate these buildings. There was a lot of controversy about this building because they didn't know whether it was square or round. Because looking at the foundations, they couldn't really tell. But in the end, they decided, well, it's square and round on top. But as you can see, everything is very intricately done, and everything is according to how things would have been built. This is the inside of that little building with a round top, and it's really too small to be of any use. In the old days, this pile of stone would have been a very beautifully carved pedestal. But now, because of the fire, everything's got destroyed, and it would have supported a big stupa that extended up to the dome. In this complex of buildings, what we were asked to do was to create an exhibition galleries for Tibetan Buddhist art from the Forbidden City collection. The Qing emperors were very devout Tibetan Buddhists, and they had. And there was a lot of artwork that came out of Tibet that were given as tributes to the emperors. And the emperors themselves were very interested in Tibetan Buddhism, that they had commissioned and even designed a lot of things on their own and have them crafted in the imperial workshops. So there were 3 buildings that we converted to exhibition use. The top one is to show Buddhist ritualistic instruments, which are mainly like tributes and headdresses, kind of lama robes and all that. This is also. Another building was given over to Buddhist statuary that were mainly in bronze, or in this case, of wood. This was the star, kind of the star piece. And in all the design, we basically kept the buildings as just like the wood shell, because we wanted people to appreciate the beauty of the construction. In another building, we have it's a gallery for exhibiting tankas. And you can see a better picture of that. And some of these tankas are from Tibet. Some of them were made in Beijing. But we created very narrow cases, very flat cases, so that because there's a lot of detail in these tankas. And so we wanted a very narrow case so that you can really put your nose up to the glass and see all the detail. And for the first time in the Forbidden City kind of exhibition design, this is really the first time where we had cases that were custom made for the actual artifacts. It's not a common thing at the Palace Museum. So now I want to talk about getting really into more educational projects. We started work on some projects at Peking University. Peking University is on the northwest corner of Beijing, and it's adjacent to the Garden of Perfect Brightness, Yanjing, and the Summer Palace. It's really immediately to the south of Yanjing. And Yanjing, the Garden of Perfect Brightness and the Summer Palace during the Qing period were where the court was. And so around the court, around the Garden of Perfect Brightness and Summer Palace, there were a lot of palaces that were built for other court officials or princes. And Peking University's piece of land essentially were composed of princes' palaces or high officials' residences. But Peking University actually, original location was not here. Even though it was founded in, I believe, 1898, Peking University used to be in the center of Beijing. And it was only after the revolution, maybe perhaps in 1950 or 1951, that they moved out to this present site. This site before that was the home to Yanjing University, which was a Christian university founded by U.S. missionaries. And in the middle is a large lake called the Unnamed Lake, which is really the scenic landmark of Peking University. This is the Unnamed Lake, and the pagoda is actually not a real pagoda; it's a water tower. But that was built quite a long time ago too. Okay, so we go to so about 5 years ago. Stanford University approached us and asked us to help them build a new kind of teaching research facility at Peking University. Stanford had a long history with Peking University. They have transfer students, they have visiting scholars and research people, and they've been going to Peking University for years. But up to then, they were always in very disconnected spaces. They were just renting offices here and there in some Peking University buildings. And so they decided that they wanted to show their commitment to China. They wanted to create a center where it was one roof for all their different functions, which their functions included teaching, research, visiting scholars, and as well as they have undergraduate students that come to Beijing every term for the term, and there would be maybe like 30 to 50 students, and they wanted to create kind of a home away from home for these students. So they started looking around for sites within the Peking University campus. They also felt that it was extremely important to be in the campus and be affiliated with Peking University. So So Peking University proposed a site for them, which is on the northern end of the campus. This is the Garden of Perfect Brightness across the road, and they offered them a site which is called Longrenyuan, which is essentially an island, and it was at one point a prince's palace, but all that had been destroyed or had been so dilapidated that there was really nothing left on the site. The island is still there, but there's no water around it right now, but they are actually right now putting in water so as to reinstate this whole area back to what it once was. This area is currently under the control of the Ministry of Cultural Relics. That means that whatever is built there has to abide by their master plan, and they have full control over approvals over how the buildings are designed and built. This is the island. You can barely make out the water because there is no water. You can barely make out the kind of the outline of the island. But Peking University has been slowly over the years been rebuilding some of the courtyard buildings according to the Ministry of Cultural Relics master plan. And on this side is a large complex for the Institute of Economic Research. And on this side, there are for the archaeology department. And actually outside of the island, on this side, they have built a very fast courtyard complex for a Institute of Mathematics. And they have hired a Princeton American-Chinese mathematician to return to China to teach here, because now that is a trend, because China's trying to find a Nobel Prize winner, produce a Nobel Prize winner, so they want to hire all these people to come back and train the people. But of course, mathematics doesn't have a Nobel Prize, so. So the Stanford Center, what they offered was one courtyard right here. And there was nothing there. There were like remnants of a building, but that was not deemed worthy to be saved. And so Peking University offered Stanford this. And they said, okay, you, instead of paying rent, you pay for the reconstruction of this building. And it's yours for 20 years, 25 years. But the building had only a square footage of 600 square meters. Very, very little. And much less than what Stanford wanted. But Stanford really wanted to be in a traditional kind of Beijing courtyard home. So we advised them that it's possible to build a two-story basement and get the area that they needed. And at that time, it was quite common in Beijing, became more common in Beijing to build deep basements underneath these traditional homes, because you couldn't go up high, because according to the city planning guidelines, and so the only thing that you could do was to go down. But Peking University didn't really do this, because Chinese people usually have a phobia about working in basements. They think that there's no light and the air is no good, no circulation, and so they've always never really built basements, even though PKU is desperately running out of space. And so anyway, we proposed a design to Stanford. Stanford accepted it, and they took it to Peking University, and they too accepted it. And so we started to build this Stanford Center. And on the ground, it's a very small building. It's a traditional courtyard building. We worked with a local traditional building design institute. You have to be registered. You have to be licensed to do traditional buildings in order to do such buildings. And because the Minister of Cultural Relics stipulated that the building must be completely made out of wood, in exactly the way that in the old days. So we worked with the local design institute to make sure that we got all the stairs and elevators to go downstairs, and to start introducing skylights that can, in strategic locations, that can admit light into the basement. This is the first level basement. It has mainly classrooms and offices, and this is the second basement, which are again more classrooms and offices, surrounding a two-story atrium. And there are pantries and student lounges and all sorts of things. And we created gardens, very small internal gardens that could allow light and something for you to look at. This is a section of the building. You can see how deep the structure is. It's actually over 10 meters deep. And the above ground of the building is actually very small. So the underground is actually 5 times bigger than the above ground. And it was structurally there were some concerns, because this was an island. It used to be surrounded by water, and the water table was quite high. These are views of the basement being dug, being excavated, and you can see that there were the neighboring buildings that had already been built, and then how deep this all goes down. And they wanted a wood building, so we gave them a wood building. Like I said, it's not difficult to find this this craft in Beijing. You just have to pay for it. Although it's really not that much more expensive. But everything is done according to tradition. There are essentially no drawings. You don't really need to do any drawings, because once you tell them the column spacing, the dimensions of the column spacing. They can tell you the height, they can tell you how big the beam should be, and everything is fabricated on site. The wood, all the wood comes in raw lumber form, and then it all gets carved and chiseled and whatever right there. And the wood normally is a red pine, and in the old days it would come from the northeast part of China, but now all that has been depleted, so now the wood is coming in from Russia. So this is how they put together a wood building, giant pieces of wood. And the wood columns all sit on stone bases, and you can see a stone base here, and it's really just a dowel. The column just has a dowel, has a male version and a positive version, and it just sits in there, and you don't need to do anything. And the whole idea of the wood structure is that it can move independently of the foundation, and so that's why supposedly wood buildings perform very well in seismic conditions. And here you see a guy making the mortise and tenon kind of, everything is mortise and tenon. There are no nails used. And this is a fairly common thing. So the inside, putting the building together. And then once the structure is up, they put up the brick walls on the ends. The brick walls on the ends really serve as a fire protection. It's a firewall, so that to prevent fires from, say, a neighboring structure from spreading to over on this side. And then they put in the roof tiles, and then they start the process of decorating the beams. Now, this process really depends on the category of the building. If you had money, or on the wealth of the client. If you had money, you would want to decorate it a lot. If you didn't have any money, you can keep it very plain. And so you would see that in the previous slides of the buildings in the Forbidden City, those were probably the maximum that you can ever do. I mean, they were done with gold leaf and all that. So anyway, but there's a whole prescribed manner of how to do this, how to do the painting and the colors, and the order of it. Like beams it's usually in red, white, and green, but there's an order of which one goes first, whether it's red and then blue and green, and then on this side it alternates, then it goes blue and then green and red. But anyway, so all the craftsmen know how to do this. And these lunettes here are saved for little kind of more decorative paintings, and the subjects can be flowers, birds, it could be landscape paintings, or it could be Chinese architecture buildings. And this is and they do this right there. And these are usually artisans. They're really more like painters. They're not necessarily artists. So because they only have a limited repertoire, you can't tell them to do something more unique. But which we try to do. We felt that it would be fun to have buildings of Stanford, iconic buildings of Stanford, to be painted into the beams, to show that this is Stanford. And so here's the guy I gave him a picture of Memorial Church, but we had to be careful in what we do because the artisans are not really versed in doing something out of the ordinary. And they also can't really do things that were in perspective because most of the Chinese drawings were not in perspective. So we had to find things that were kind of easy to do. And still, they didn't do a very good job, but everybody thought that they were kind of cute. So this is the outside of the building, which is a very traditional Beijing courtyard building. And here we have the skylights that allow light down into the basement. And this is the main entrance. This is the main donor. His name is above the building is named after him, and he is it was actually his son who made the donation. His son was a graduate of Stanford and a Stanford trustee, but his father was a Yanjing University graduate. So there was a kind of connection between Yanjing and Peking University and Stanford. And so that's why he made the donation. And as you enter the courtyard, there's a kind of a modified spirit wall, kind of similar to the one that we have here. But here we have it's the logo of the Stanford crest, the seal, the tree, which is a pine tree. And you can see that there are skylights that are a bit light down at the bottom. During the day, we have a skylight in the center with a bench that people can sit around in. But otherwise, it is a completely traditional courtyard, and with even traditional planting, pine trees on the north side, and flowering trees, which are pomegranate, and on the south side. At night, the skylight becomes something to look at in the courtyard. On the ground floor in the old buildings, we kept it deliberately simple, and Stanford wanted to show off the Chinese construction method. So we did something. We learned something from our Forbidden City projects, and then we supplemented them with choosing simple Ming furniture and handmade wool rugs that were still that you could still get in Beijing now. This is the director's office, slightly different from Jeremy's, but it's completely. They wanted a whole traditional Chinese look. This is a boardroom, and this is a standard visiting scholar's office, very small. But downstairs is another story. We have a skylight, we have a two-story atrium. So in a way, the downstairs is a modern interpretation of a courtyard, where all the classrooms and meeting rooms all gather around this atrium space. And the atrium space is really a multi-use room. You could use it for lectures. You could also use it for cocktail receptions, or just for lounging. And color, we kept the color palette to be very, very light, because in the basement you wanted it to be light in order to make it look spacious. But actually, these skylights, even though they're not that big, this place actually is quite well lit during the day, and you barely have to turn on any lights. That's another use for the atrium. Somebody donated a rug, a carpet. The man who gave the rug has no connection with either Stanford or Peking University. He owns a very large carpet factory in Hong Kong, and he makes it a habit of going around and making rugs for universities and giving them away. So, Jeremy, you may think of going to. Maybe he has children that he needs to get into college. So around the courtyard, we also have large photo murals of Stanford, because this place is also supposed to give the Chinese students or future Stanford students an idea of what the campus in Palo Alto looks like. So that's what we did that by having big photo murals stuck on the wall. That's into the atrium, and we try to discreetly fill it with some reproduction antiques. And you can see that we have a lot of skylights that are a bit light into the basement, and you really don't get the sense that you're in the basement here. This is their pantry or the tea room, and here we use some Suzhou windows to looking back at Stanford buildings. And these are the small light wells, in a sense. They're very small. They're only about 2 meters deep. And then you have offices that surround them. And then we did some very basic kind of bamboo shoot rocks. This is a student lounge, and we put in photo murals of Stanford's football games, because that's a big thing that they reminisce about. Standard meeting rooms, and they look out into the internal light wells, which are very narrow, but somehow they actually seem to kind of work not too bad. We planted bamboo in there, and we used traditional clay tiles that were in a custom pattern that we made. They're kind of business school model classroom. Another kind of a seminar room where you can rearrange things. And we used a lot of wooden lattices, not because of its Chinese, because it's kind of Chinese, but also because this pinwheel pattern is actually found in the hospital building in Palo Alto. It was designed in the 50s by Gerald Szeto, who was a major modern architect. And so this was also supposed to recall buildings at Stanford. Doors can open, and it's very open, and you can see the light well here. It's actually only 2 meters, but it gives the illusion of providing a lot of light. And this was last month at the center. Michelle Obama came to China, and she made a speech here. This was her only speech that she did on her China trip, and the White House had thought that this was the perfect location for her to give her talk, because her talk was about the virtues and importance of studying abroad and the kind of cross-fertilization of education, of cultural exchange. And they felt that the Stanford Center was a very fitting location, because it was an American it was an outpost of an American university in a Chinese university. So she gave her a big speech here, and they invited about 200 odd people. And then afterwards, she had a cross-continent discussion with students at Stanford. And this is why I show you this is because this is what they call, we just installed this classroom. It's what they call a highly immersive classroom. And the idea of it is that when you're sitting on one side of the table, you look over and you see the other people on the other side, and it's exactly the same. The 2 rooms are exact replicas of each other. So one's in Beijing and the other one's in Palo Alto. So I personally don't think that it's that critical, and I find the design a little bit kind of outdated already. But Stanford thinks that this is, for them, this is the future. And it was a very expensive thing to do with all this technology, but they felt that this was the way to go. And I guess it's more effective here, where you really think that you're sitting at one table and the other people are sitting across from you. And the only difference is the logo. Here it says Beijing, and this is from Palo Alto looking at Beijing, and this one is Beijing looking at Palo Alto. So. Okay, getting back. Now we go to the CIW, and this is a picture that I'm sure everybody knows. It's the old Parliament building being built, and then with all the sheep grazing in front. I think it's a remarkable picture. This is just to give you a little history of ANU. This is the old Canberra High School, which later on was absorbed into ANU, and it's now the current art school. And so it's really one of the oldest buildings on campus now. This building in the back here is the Institute of Anatomy, which is now the National Archives for Film and Sound. Correct? And that's another view of the high school. And as you can see, this was in probably in the 1930s. 40s, so a lot of the campuses haven't been built yet. This is the Institute of Anatomy, and even though this building is becoming the National Archives for Film and Sound, is never really an ANU building, but it's important for us because this was the place where the development of Chinese studies in Canberra and at the ANU actually started. The first George Morrison lecture series actually started in this building, and it was held there for maybe perhaps 10 years or so before it stopped and then moved to the ANU. So in a way, this was the beginning of Chinese studies in Canberra. This is a picture of a college council at ANU. This man is, I forgot his name, Sir Frederick Eggleston. He was Australia's first minister to China. And this man here is Douglas Barry Copland, the vice chancellor, the first vice chancellor of ANU. And it was actually these two men that together that were instrumental in creating the Department of Far Eastern Studies at the ANU. And you'll be interested to, when you go on your building tour later on, is that these tables, Benjamin was able to salvage from the ANU warehouse. These, and they're now being used in different places in the building. These tables were designed by Fred Ward, who was a rather influential industrial designer of the time, and he created a whole line of furniture for the ANU. This is a picture of the site. This is actually where we are now, where the shed is. And this building was which is now the College of Law, was actually the first building for the Faculty of Asian Studies. So in a way, it's kind of returning to the same neighborhood. And you can see the double row of poplar trees here, and these are the same double row of poplar trees, and then the new building on the side. Like what Benjamin was saying, is that the building is actually quite simple in its planning, but it was really all determined by site considerations. First of all, we had a very beautiful grove of eucalyptus trees here, which could not be touched, and as well as a lot of other heritage trees along the side of the building. So in a way, the boundary of the building was very determined and tight. And the program requirements that we were given by Jeremy and Benjamin was that there should be an auditorium, the one that we're in now, a gallery and a library, and then offices and classrooms. So one of the things that really determined some of the site considerations that we factored in was that there's a big pedestrian walkway against the South Oval, and then there's also a connection between the law school now and the South Oval. So we made the entrance of the building really at the intersection of these two paths. And then there was a third kind of landscape axis that connected the Sullivan's Creek with the existing grove of eucalyptus trees. And this secondary landscape axis is where we located the tea room, so the tea room is kind of a buffer between Sullivan's Creek and the eucalyptus trees. And planning-wise, the north side was where it's the most public face of the building. So we put the auditorium and the library/gallery along Sullivan's Creek, so that it has the best views. It could be seen by the most people. And the library over here, because it turns the corner and has great views of the creek and of the Black Mountains beyond. And all the offices are nestled in the back so that they've become quiet spaces overlooking the eucalyptus courtyard. I don't know whether overlooking the South Oval is that quiet, but anyway. And the second floor is essentially the same as the ground floor, except that the library is on the second floor, and then the very symbolic spaces, the boardroom and Jeremy's office, is on the major axis, because the emperor has to be on axis. So this is the view that there's kind of no point in showing you these photos because the building is right there. But anyway, the idea of the auditorium is a building that is meant to also serve the university. So we saw it as that it's a building that maybe should be separate, that's not attached to the research center. And so the idea was to use a courtyard to unite the buildings, and then also to create a sequence of spaces that leads you into the center and out of the center. And the sequence of spaces is really, that's what is, in a way, Chinese about it, is really the Chinese architecture is really more about spatial sequences, and experiencing a procession. And here we used a very traditional motif of a spirit wall to terminate you as you come in. So you have to turn. And the idea of turning is because superstition has it that evil spirits can only travels in straight lines. They cannot make turns. And normally, sometimes this wall can be blank, or sometimes it has a window to frame a view of a distant view, so that it becomes, in a way, like a painting. And so we have an internal courtyard, and the courtyard is planted with seasonal trees. Because there's a slight slope, so the terrace is divided into 4 terraces, each planted with trees that represents a certain season. And this is the boardroom at the top, which you can see through the spirit wall. And the idea of circular openings is not it's a very common motif in Chinese garden architecture. All these are in Chinese gardens. And some of them you can walk through, some you can't. But what they do is that they all frame a view, so as to make something more than what is actually there. So most of these are Suzhou gardens, because Suzhou is known for garden architecture. The boardroom, we decided to use a kind of identify the major elements of the program, the boardroom, the conference room, and all that with a special window. And we wanted to be, because Chinese window shapes are very identifiable, and they can be seen in many different shapes and different forms all over Chinese garden architecture. So we picked here a plum blossom window with a cracked ice motif for these windows. And as you can see, plum blossom windows are, although this is a different proportion, they're rather common features. And then of course you get more complicated shapes, leaves and chilies and whatnot. But of course these are much harder to do now in today's construction. So we didn't want Hindmarsh to tear their hair out doing something like this. So the library and the gallery is treated as a glass pavilion, because it turns the corner and it creates kind of a beacon or a lighthouse at night. And because of sun shading requirements, we used a suspended sunscreen, perforated sunscreen, which also filters the light at night. And the idea for these things are really, they're perforated. They're also in a pinwheel-like motif. The pinwheel motif is seen a lot in this building. It's a very traditional Chinese motif, but here we abstracted it a little bit to make it a little bit more modern looking. But the faceting of the panels is really kind of inspired by Chinese traditional screens, and so these are traditional folding screens, things like that, and from looking from inside out, so that there's always a finery breaking down the view. And at night, it's to become a kind of a lighthouse, a beacon for this corner of the campus. Jeremy's office, so that he can wave to everybody from there. And windows are also based on this. Windows for each office. Each office is really identified by its own window. Every office has its own special window, so you can tell exactly, okay, I'm in the third window over here or whatever. And they're also a pinwheel, making a very deep pinwheel pattern so as to create adequate sunshade. And then we have also the plum blossom windows on the end here to symbolize the location of a conference room. And colors are used here at, and that was at Benjamin's great recommendation to, these are orange, red, or blue, or indigo blue. They're really imperial colors, but they're also colors that are also seen on those painted beams that I just showed you at the conference at the Stanford Center. So in a way, they recall certain elements of Chinese architecture, but not, it's not explicit. In the interior, Benjamin had sourced a great Shanghai furniture company that makes modernized interpretations of traditional Chinese furniture. The furniture is a little bit more streamlined than the old, but they still have the stone insets for the seat tops and the tabletops. And then in the lobby, we used a lattice work that is meant to recall kind of a bamboo forest. And then in the lobby, there's a centerpiece, which is a piece of stone that is quite commonly seen in Chinese art, Chinese furniture. And it's a piece of stone that recalls a landscape painting, except in this case it's round, but anyway. Views of the tea room, which is the connection between Sullivan's Creek and the eucalyptus grouping of eucalyptus trees. And all the office areas have a lot of breakout spaces where people, if people don't want to be in their offices, they can come out and meet people and discuss things. So it's always about impromptu meeting up with people and discussing things and generating discourse. Light in many ways is sometimes light is brought in by slots, and sometimes it's by skylights. And here in the library, you can see the effect of a screen. And this is the fretboard table that you saw in the previous picture at the academic council. So anyway, I won't dwell too much on this building because you're right here and we can look at it together. But the interiors are meant to create a lot of spaces for people to socialize and kind of unique conference spaces. And and using windows to frame a view, and that's, I think, what kind of says it about this building. Now I talk a little bit about this current project that we're doing in Peking University. It is the Yanjing Academy, and coincidentally today is the day that they are formally announcing the formation of this Yanjing Academy. Yenching Academy it's going to be a new residential college within Peking University, and it will be for Chinese studies, and they will offer 200 students, eventually 200 students, a one-year master's degree in Chinese studies. And what is different about it is that the courses will all be taught in English, and 80% of the students will come from abroad, and then the remaining 20% from China. And the professors will be called from Peking University as well as from abroad. So in a way, this is a major undertaking for Peking University. And the site is located in the middle of the campus. This is the university library that people who've been to Beida may know. And this is there are 6 historical buildings. They're U-shaped buildings that face each other across a big lawn. And these buildings were the old women's dormitories that belonged to Yenching University before Peking University came in 1951 and absorbed Yanjing Academy. This building at the end of the lawn is a gymnasium now. And the lake that you saw, the beautiful lake, is actually right, it's not too far from here to the north. And this is a great lawn, and there's currently some very beautiful trees on the north end, and I believe there's a monument to PKU students who died in the revolution. This is a kind of 3D drawing of what the site actually looks like. So these are the 6 buildings, and this is the gymnasium, and this is the big university library. It's absolutely huge, and this is the big assembly hall, and that's the lake, the beginnings of the lake. This area, when it was Yanjing University, I mean, even though it says Peking here, the Chinese says Yenching. It was actually planned by American architects. This was an early proposal. It was not quite realized, but this would be the west gate. To those who know Peking University, this is the west gate of Peking University. This is the lake, and this is the area where the women's dormitories are. And it was always, if you look at the numbers, there was always slated to be women's dormitories here. This is from another map, which is probably slightly later and probably more final, and you can see the beginnings of these U-shaped buildings. This is what it looks like now. These buildings were actually designed by an American architect in the 1920s, and he embodied, he used a lot of Chinese architecture motifs in his buildings, even though all these buildings are covered in ivy now. But as you can see, they're actually they're brick buildings and wood construction, and they front onto this very large green space. More pictures of the green space as it is now. This is the big gymnasium that forms one end of it. And this green space was always a green space, and it was enjoyed by the students even back in the 20s and 30s. And even now. And it's very rare, actually, to see Chinese students sitting on grass, but they do here. So this is it's one of the few open spaces left at Peking University, and and the students actually really like this lawn. These are old pictures of what this area looked like in the 20s and 30s. This is actually one of those 6 buildings, and it was all women's dorms, so that's why you only see women in these pictures. This is pictures of daily life, recreational activities, wash laundry, eating, canteens. So these 6 buildings used to be dormitories, but since the 50s and up until now, they're no longer dormitories, they're now offices. So we were asked to, the Peking University decided that they will locate the new Yanjing Academy here. Because there's no other space available, and this was really the heart of the campus, and they felt that this was a very special place for it. This was the right place for it. And because it's a residential college, they wanted to restore the 6 buildings back to dormitories and then have all the teaching facilities underground. And because of what we've done at the Stanford Center, they thought that has, had a lot of virtues about it. But these 6 buildings are actually, out of 4 of the 6 buildings are actually historical landmarks because they were built in the 1920s. Number 3 and number 6 were actually built in the 50s. So they're not considered landmarks, but for all purposes, we're treating them all as landmarks. So there's nothing that we can do to them on the outside, except to renovate them to be back to what it was. But these buildings don't have basements, these 6 buildings. So PKU's idea is to shore up these buildings and dig basements underneath it, 2 stories of basements. So it's a very major structural, a lot of major structural work. And we have to get special approval from the Ministry of Cultural Relics in order to do this. But the main idea of it is that we still keep the lawn, we have to keep the lawn essentially clear for the students to use, but we have to introduce, of course, skylights which are represented by these blue elements, to bring skylight down into the teaching facilities. And in between the 6 buildings, these were right now parking lots, and we're now creating new entrances for the academy to go down into the teaching. So these become the 4 big entry points. And then there's a sunken plaza that actually leads you also down there. And this is kind of controversial because it does take away from the green space. But I think that there's not much that one can really do. And the back here, all the old trees, specimen trees, are all going to be preserved, together with a monument to the Revolution heroes. This is the 2nd floor, showing that they're all reverted back to single rooms. And if you notice that these are U-shaped buildings, but all the buildings actually face south, because facing south is very important in China, especially in climates like Beijing, where in the winter it really makes a difference whether your room faces south or north. This is a plan of the 1st basement. This is where underneath all the 6 buildings we're excavating. But we're not excavating under the courtyards, under the existing courtyards, because they have specimen trees. So these spaces are all going to be used for student activities that will be tied in with the dormitories above. And then the real basement is actually the main basement 2 level, where all the teaching facilities are under the lawn. And as you can see, there will be libraries, there will be tiered classrooms, there will be kind of business school type classrooms, there will be auditoriums. So all the major big span spaces are underneath the lawn where we could actually do it. There's a 3rd basement, and this is a very peculiar requirement. This is a bomb shelter. In China, all public and residential buildings require bomb shelters, but if you were an office building or an apartment building, the bomb shelter, you can use your parking lot as a bomb shelter. You don't have to provide all the mechanical systems for it to work. It's only during wartime when you have to fit it out with all the mechanical equipment and to work and to operate as a bomb shelter. But in China, for an educational building, the bomb shelter has to be built and everything has to be provided as if it has to work the first day. So, and the area of the bomb shelter is a prescribed area that you cannot change. So we actually have to build this bomb shelter and fit it out and have all the poison gas disinfectant system, filtration system and all that in here. But you can use it for another function, but there's really not much you can do with it except for storage. So it's really kind of amazing because this is a huge, huge basement. And you can see here that the bomb shelter would be here. And then this is the section connecting the buildings on either side. And we have skylights that illuminate all the major spaces for the main teaching facilities. And then we leave enough soil depth, 3 meters worth, for trees. Because 3 meters is the magic dimension that the building department recognizes as enough for growing trees. Big trees. That's another section, and this is a basement that they're going to dig below the historical buildings. So it's really, this is quite a structural tour de force. But that's what they wanted to do. This is a section through the main plaza coming down, and then there's an auditorium. There's a 500-person auditorium, and then skylights for the library, and this is for a regular lobby. So, not a very good rendering, but the idea of it is this aerial rendering is to show that it's really nothing much will be changed. It's still going to be very green. You will get buildings that were and plazas that were built in existing car parks, but everything about the buildings are that they will be renovated and the existing specimen trees will be preserved. original buildings will be, these are the original dormitory buildings, and they'll be turned back to dormitories. And then in between them will be more skylights and stairs and elevators that will take you down into the underground facility. This is like a residential courtyard, so it will be a very quiet space because this will only be used by the students living in this dorm. In between where the parking lot is would be more glassy lobbies with skylights and all that. Daytime, the main lobby, one of the 4 entry points. This is the big kind of sunken stepped plaza that goes on axis. These are the skylights in the lawn that will light up the major spaces. The stepped plaza with the old buildings up here. And this is the inside. These are very early drawings, and we have to redo them. But we've already been told that we should have to make it more Chinesey. Because this is for Chinese studies. And so, but the idea of that there is to try and create as much light as possible, like what we did at the Stanford Center, and to make it into a more modern academic environment, where there's a lot of light, and this is the library, like in the old days. The library also has, different informal, amphitheaters where you can sit around and talk, or you can have, book discussions and readings and whatnot. And then you will have the typical state-of-the-art tiered classrooms. So these are all the big span spaces that we will locate under the lawn. Regular auditoriums. The business school type things, which seems to be very in demand these days. And then regular smaller classrooms, seminar rooms. Because foreign students, so. Underground offices for research, professors or research people, and then they will look out into light wells, and maybe we can do living walls and all that, so as to give it something to look at. And then the old rooms will be reverted back to in this case a single room, very small, but it comes with a bathroom. So you can see in the old days, I don't know how many are in this room, maybe 4 bunk beds, and so. But these are exactly the rooms that like this. So we'll try to make them very efficient, very kind of like a ship's cabin. And then at the end of the buildings, you have a special unit for visiting scholars. It will be essentially a 1-bedroom. You have a small living room and a bedroom alcove, and then it's just like in the old days. And so that's about that gets about to the end of my presentation about academic buildings. And I just want to end it with this particular project, which is a traditional Beijing courtyard house that I thought you guys might be interested in looking at. The CIW is actually not our first project with an Australian connection. This project is a project for a certain Australian media mogul and his Chinese wife. And this happened about several years ago, and we were asked to design their Beijing residence for them and their 2 young daughters. There's been a lot of controversy about the demolition of hutongs and courtyard houses in Beijing, and it's true. But there's now a resurgence of recreating or rebuilding new courtyard houses. Ones that are more comfortable, that deals with the issues of water and sewage, and circulation, because most of the courtyard houses, you have to, in the winter, it's very difficult to live in because you have to go outside to go to your kitchen, or you have to go outside to the bathroom. But now there's a new rage of building courtyard houses. And of course, these are all very big and normally only available for the wealthy. But the tradition is, but it is going that way. And it used to be that foreigners like to live in these places, but now wealthy Chinese are as well. And I'm sure it'll filter down to the middle class if land can be, if such places can be bought. This particular property was actually a very bad property. They bought it at in essence, a fire sale. The developer had gone bankrupt, and all he left was a concrete shell. And this is not a traditional courtyard building that you saw previously. That's all made out of wood. It's actually made out of concrete. So it wasn't a very historical or accurate rendition. But we tried our best, and we did it up in all the traditional, with all the traditional features. So this is what they call a 3-courtyard house. This is we're looking at it from the entrance courtyard, and then there's another courtyard, and then there's a building, and then there's a courtyard in the back. So it's a 3-courtyard house. But this house is special in that it also has a garden. This is the front courtyard, which ends at the living room. The living room is the one that separates the second courtyard and the third courtyard. And as you can see, it's not big. Everything's very small. But they have been designed in such a way that all the rooms are connected indoors. And all the building materials is really fairly run-of-the-mill, very traditional. This is the inside of the living room, where you can see that it's not that wide, but you have the front courtyard and the back courtyard, and you can see that the structure is not right. This is all concrete, so it's not what timber construction should look like. But we made it timber anyway. And the owners had a rather extensive collection of Chinese contemporary art, and they put it all over the place. This is the other view of the living room. This is their study, and in the study there's a large Zhu Wei painting. This is the garden on the side. It's a garden that is really based on the Suzhou type garden. It's not a very well designed garden, but it's very unusual for a courtyard house in Beijing to have such a large garden. And underneath this garden underneath this whole thing is actually a huge basement. More pictures of the garden. There's a tea house. There's a tea room, kind of Japanese tatami type thing, that overlooks the Chinese garden. And this is down in the basement. The basement is really used for entertainment purposes because this particular courtyard came built already, and there was no possibilities of adding skylights. So it's completely dark inside, and it was really only good for entertainment, which means in current Chinese fashion, means wine cellar, pool room, screening room. It's like all the trappings of bourgeois wealth. So this is a wine rack actually. There are no wine bottles in there. Screening room to watch the couple's movies. And this is their swimming pool, and which we try to make it look like an illuminated basket. But it's quite big. I mean, so you have a lap pool and a kids pool, and then this is the third courtyard, which is where the bedrooms are. And so there are 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom, actually is on this side. Master bedroom is here, and then you have the 2 kids' bedrooms. But very small courtyard. But actually, this is not too bad. It's very very cozy. This is the master bedroom. All the furniture comes from France. But the structure again is all faked. This is her bath. There are two baths, her bath and his bath. And because this would be where there was an outdoor courtyard here, so we glazed it over and put a tub and a shower there. And then she also has a piece of artwork here that you'll see later on, custom, that she specially commissioned. This is his bathroom, and this is her bathroom again. And then this is the piece of work, this is the piece of art that she commissioned from a local artist. And I think that you know why that has special connotations. Whoops. Sorry. I think, well, anyway, that's... I can't get it. But anyway, that's really the end of my talk. And